One man. Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the base is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. And we're kicking off year 5 of the show with a special treat today. We've been promising you for a long time, a peek behind the scenes of NIL, the transfer portal, and you get all of that and more thanks to our guest today, founder and CEO of Brick Athlete Enterprises, Zach Cardenez, joining the show. Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Mitch. Thanks for having me on. I want to give you guys a shout out and some credit for what you guys have done in the space. Year 5, that's super impressive. A lot of people can't make it that far, and you guys are going to well surpass that. So I'm thankful to be on. I know we've talked for a little bit, but I'm doing well.
Awesome, man. Yeah, really excited to get you on. And, you know, the transfer portal has officially been closed now for the past couple of weeks. And when we started talking about getting you on the show, I felt like getting you on after this latest edition of the portal would give our listeners kind of that insight that maybe people think they know what the transfer portal is like, what the ins and outs of that daily operation are like. But obviously to have you on the show to answer some questions, give people kind of that peek behind the curtain, if you will, is really exciting. And I'm looking forward to it today. First question, just off the top. We had the calendar change. We had just one portal this time around. What was that like, dealing with those calendar changes and having that window kind of constricted to one singular, will?
Yeah, so it was in the past, we had the December and the April window. So it gave guys a little bit of a chance to do a couple of different things. One of the things was go through spring ball as you would traditionally and realize, okay, maybe this isn't the fit I need. I'm not in the spot I want to be in, or even academically finish that semester, graduate in May, or finish the year, you could say, and graduate in May and then transfer on as a grad transfer. So only limiting it to January. First of all, I'm not the biggest fan of the timing. I think December is a little bit better of a window, but I think the calendar's all over the place. First off, there's a lot of guys who were expected to graduate in May that left their school early, and something about the transfer portal that a lot of people don't think about because college football fans tend to think football first. There is a progress to degree aspect that gets lost in this whole equation. And sometimes if you're so close to graduating, when you transfer before graduating, it pushes credits back. It takes a while to go ahead and finish, complete. Maybe you have to change your major. If you were at a good academic institution and you transfer somewhere just for football, it's a lesser degree with a different major. So I think the 2 windows, or even just an April window, allowed guys to have the academic flexibility as well as the athletic flexibility. But then on the other side with coaches, if you go through spring ball and you think you have a roster set, ready to roll into the workouts in the summer and fall camp, and the rug gets pulled out from under you, then, you have to really restructure everything in such a hurry and hope you hit. But, I think there's a lot of positive that can come from one window, no matter what the timing may be when it comes to decision-making as far as the players go, making a decision and learning how to stick with the decision. And also for the teams. Now they know their team for the rest of the year, no matter whether, if that's in January, if it would have been in April, what have you, you know your team. So the team is what it is. And, there's some D2 and D3s that can trickle through because their portal's totally different. But as far as the big time Division I, whether it's FBS or FCS guys go, it's set as of now. So one portal, I don't think it's the worst idea. Just the calendar's a little wonky.
Well, you're preaching to the choir there. Whether it be small podcasts like us, Nick Saban, it's clear that the current calendar is, I think, half-baked, if you will, right? Maybe we're getting closer to the ultimate solution, but there's still a lot of other hurdles and bridges to cross before we get there. So, to hear that that presents some unique challenges to you as the agent. You talk about the educational component, which, let's be honest, does not get thrown around in a lot of portal
Right.
discussions. It's a lot of, hey, when does this check get cut? And you talked about the
Yep.
coaching side. How did they build a two deep? But we are still in the world of amateur athletics. Technically
Yep.
speaking, we are talking about these educational institutions, and for a lot of these kids that will not go pro after their collegiate career is over, I still think we've got to figure out a system that allows them to move, that allows them to benefit from their NIL while they're in college, but also get that degree and also get that education without, like you said, compromising, having to change a major just because, hey, there's a better opportunity elsewhere.
100%. No, I'm completely in the same corner as you on that, the same stance. It's tough, and you have a lot of guys who value their academics, and you also have the reality of the situation. And from our point of view, it's mentoring these guys, advising them, but also you have to be real with them about the NFL. And if just statistics alone, not everyone's going, very few are going to even sustain. And so what are you doing to set yourself up for life after football? And, you have a chance to make a little bit of money. Here's some, you get them connected with the financial advisors and teach them the investment side of things. And, but at the end of the day, it's not everybody's going pro. So what can you do to help ensure that life after football is set? And that's where the education component comes in for me. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say everybody thinks about it or talks about it, but I come from a background where education was important. So I preach the same thing to my guys.
Well, man, kudos to you. When NIL was first getting going, and I'm sure you were involved with this, like the biggest question that the university I was working for had was, how do we pass along that financial education piece of it, right? Kids are going to be getting cash, a new income stream for the first time in their lives. And do they know what all that means, what all the ramifications of that are like? And so with that, we had Tulsa that introduced the Portal House this year. There's been a lot of media coverage about how schools prepare for the transfer portal to build that new roster, to a lot of times flip a roster from maybe some pieces and some smaller groups to, hey, we've got to fill out our scholarship limit, whether that be 85 or up to 100 plus now. But from your perspective, what is your version of the Portal House? Like, how do you prepare for your athletes to go into the portal and to manage all the chaos that then unfolds?
A lot of communication. So we have a decent sized team. I obviously head it all and run most of it, and just staying organized. So it's communication with the guys, understanding where they want to be, whether it's location, conference, understanding scheme is huge. A lot of people aren't thinking about that as well. If you have a defensive tackle, and somebody's in a 3-down or, 3-man front versus a 4-man front, understanding what's going to benefit them better, because at the end of the day, the goal is always the NFL. So you want to just still try to push that narrative if they're ready to transfer schools, aside from the academic component we already spoke about. And so the biggest tool for preparation with us is going to be communication with our guys. Where do you want to be? Okay, cool. Here's the schools. We do what I call a roster deconstruction. So we're going in, whether it's PFF or even just a simple, scroll through the roster of, okay, these guys are aging out or graduating. If it's their 5th year, or you see a guy obviously with draft projections that are going to be high, that position's going to come open. So spreadsheets, I probably work off of like 5 or 6 a day, running through them with all of our guys, making sure they're good. And then, when the portal opens up, I'm not, there's things that have maybe been spoken about in the past, or through, different avenues or channels, what have you. But when the portal opens up is really when everything really just gets to go. And so it's making sure the work was done from, we could say October to December, the communication with our guys, and making sure they're, number one, feeling good where they are. You have to finish out a year strong. And then once that season ends, and that's where the January window it was kind of nice, but also weird is, the season ends for some of those guys the beginning of December. Now they have a month where they know they want to leave. And it's this weird limbo month of, my payment, I get my last revenue share payment on the 25th. So I can't tell my coaches until then. And it's just this whole weird process of how do you play that middleman, or walk that fine line with these guys. But, one of the most important pieces to the process for me is being a man and speaking to your coaches face to face about it, no matter what the decision is going to be. I know, I've had We have a bunch of clients, but I've also had conversations with other guys where their agencies maybe didn't care about waiting for the exit meetings or what have you. But I'm big on go to your exit meeting, have a conversation as a man with the coach, and whether he's happy or not, he will respect that you as a 19, 20-year-old kid had the ability to tell him to his face. So that's when that process starts for me.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think for a lot of people listening, that timeline is pushed maybe further out than what they thought, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you get towards the back half of the season, maybe even as far as early as week, 4 or 5, when we've started to see some of those opt-outs, kids that are going to preserve their redshirt year and look to transfer elsewhere. But to hear that you guys are on top of it from a schematic standpoint, finding those relationships that best work with your specific athlete and their hopes and dreams, I think is obviously a really cool aspect that, quite frankly, does not get talked about enough. With all of that preparation, and when it does come to make those moves, you talk about being big on those exit meetings and the kids, telling their coaches those decisions face to face. How have you gone about establishing relationships with coaching staffs when you can have a player in their office one day and he might be gone the next?
Maintaining the understanding of I work for the client, but I have their best interest at hand. Now, it
Mhm.
is a weird line because I've had situations where I have a client at a school who leaves. I also have a client of the same position that they're going to try to recruit. So a lot of the coaching staffs have understood the business side of it now, which is really nice to see. And I think if you go about it the right way and you're doing it, like I said, very forthcoming as a man and not stabbing anybody in the back or trying to swipe anybody or, any of the tampering stuff. If you can stay away from that as much as possible, I think the relationships with the coaches will be fine. And it's just understanding relationships and how they work. And open communication, whether it's, let's say, a director or player personnel somewhere, and they know all these guys know who my clients are at their schools, and we talk throughout the year. And, I'm never like, oh, he's leaving in October, because even if the kid's thinking about it, you never know what can happen for the rest of the season. But understanding that it's a business and my clients at Brick are always going to do it the right way. And so trying to make sure that they understand that. And, just if one guy leaves, it doesn't mean you don't have to work with me anymore, because it is a weird side of, the business where you see in a lot of the headlines, a lot of flips. And if you look at all of my commitments from this past cycle, we had 0 guys flip because I'm not, I'm not playing the flip game. I understand, some people go about it that way, and that's okay. That's how they handle their business. But as far as we do it here, we're very, A to B. What's the most direct way to get the job done? And what's the cleanest way to get the job done? I know there's a lot of agents that you could say don't care what people think about them, because if you have a certain quality of client, then it doesn't really matter. I know in the baseball side, Scott Boras is the guy, doesn't care what you think because he has everyone. But if you don't have everyone, your relationships matter. And I've heard it more times than not from the personnel guys and GMs is like, oh wow, like you're a sight for sore eyes in the business, because you're doing it the right way. So it's an interesting cycle to be a part of.
With that, you mentioned talking with director of player personnel's GMs. Have you started to see the majority of the schools switch towards more of that kind of CEO and GM framework?
Yes, 100%. Most people deal with GMs or hire GMs, and that's who we deal with. There's a few directors of player personnel that get involved, and they're mainly on the recruiting side. So for anyone that's listening or watching that doesn't understand the personnel, if personnel's in the title, it's usually just the X's and O's. It's the football side of things. When the GM comes into place, that's where the dollars come in. That's usually the contract negotiations and anything as far as some of the personnel stuff goes. But from what I've seen with the schools, the hierarchy is usually GM, then director of player personnel. But most people are going to that framework. I think it's just a little bit easier. It's a business now, so you have to run it as such. And even, a team, you could look at Florida. They brought in the general manager, who I think was an exec with the Jaguars for a while. And I mean, that's as business as it gets right there. And so you just have to have somebody, because you're crunching numbers at the end of the day. Essentially, you have a salary cap you have to stay under. I want to bring in 30 players. How do we make it work?
Yeah. With that, and I don't know if this is kind of a funny question, if this is a pain point, like, the line between professional and amateur as I alluded to, kind of is being more and more blurred with
Yeah.
every day that we take, right? And you mentioned like schools are now running this like in many NFL franchises. So how do y'all kind of balance that? Like, what do you see as the future of college football from where it stands today?
It's a weird dynamic or situation, you could say. I was talking with our attorney about it. It's because it all stems down to number one, they aren't employees. It's a weird line to cross. The pay for play and all of that can't really be a thing. So it's really hard to say where it's going to go from here. I think there's going to continue to be plenty of situations that we're seeing that are in the news, whether it's good or bad or blurred lines, lawsuits, trying to push it through even in Congress, which I never understand that, but I mean, I
Yeah.
guess, it is what it is. I mean, it's hard, number one, from an agent's perspective, but number two, as a fan, I can't even imagine, because you don't have that inside look or understanding from the guys working on the team. So when you see these bills getting passed through Congress to try to get approved, it's like there's so much that's going on. And I remember, I mean, even just 10 years ago, as a teenager with my dad watching college football, I never thought this would even be a thing. I was watching Johnny Manziel run around for fun. And now it's, imagine what could have been. And so I don't even know where it's going to go. I just think it's going to keep going down this slippery slope. And, I don't know what it's going to take for there to be some order. I'm sure it's going to come here in the future, rather, I think near, closer than further away. But I think it's going to keep running for a few more years for sure.
Yeah. With all the changes that are happening,
Mhm.
college football obviously not the same as it was a decade ago. You are right there at the intersection of one of the most volatile developments in sports history. You've talked about it. There's some ups, there's some downs, there's a lot of questions. What gets Zach Cardenez out of bed every morning? Why do you run Brick Athletes?
It's a good question. I run it for the guys that were better athletes than me. I played baseball, didn't go far with it at all. Loved the sport. I love sports in general. I grew up in the South just like you, so you understand the passion and the love for it. But honestly, it's really big on changing people's lives. I think that's something that I've realized is touching. You get one guy a deal, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but even the simple text of, "Man, you changed my life. You changed the trajectory of this. You changed the way I've looked at this." It'd be easy to say like, "Oh, it's cool. We're around football players. We travel. The contracts are cool, and having the inside look, is a cool thing." But I really do think it's for the benefit of the guys and seeing what we can do together. When I meet a guy where they're at, and then 2 years later, where we've taken them. And, I can even I have a client that I'll use an example of, Dylan Manuel. He was a defensive tackle. I ended up finding him when he was at Charleston Southern. So he was an FCS guy. He transferred to App State last year, had a really good season. He's now at Colorado. So we built the relationship from Charleston Southern all the way to the Big 12 now. And so seeing stories or things like that happen, it's the relationships that we're building. And in 10 years, I know we're still going to be close, because it's where you were to where you are now. It's huge to me. So I'm just a relationships driven guy. So I'd say, what gets me out of bed and really gets me going with Brick is changing guys' lives and helping them, level up. Because at the end of the day, as the CEO of the business, what levels them up also levels us up.
Sure. Yeah. Well, man, that's great answer, inspiring to hear, because relationships are at the center of it. And I think that leads me to the next question that probably a lot of folks have when they watch the transfer portal, right? And through all the headlines, there's, feints one way, rumors that a kid's going to commit here and then he ends up at a different school. So with specifically this last portal window, I think we had a couple of instances of this where a kid was maybe committed to one university out of the portal, ends up signing with somebody else. At what point in your mind for your athletes is the deal finalized, if you can even call it that?
So the language in the contracts are different from team to team. So this isn't the answer. It's more of a sidebar. So I think a real problem is there's no players association, right? And it's not a problem as in it needs to be changed effective immediately, but there is an issue because, when you have the players association and you have people governing different parts of the contracts or the way things are ran, it's a lot smoother. And now you have contracts at every university that they're different. They're all different. There's different, components or buyouts or whatever you have in these contracts where some schools may not implement them. Some schools, it's what people call liquidated damages. Well, how do you define that? And so it's just really unique school to school. But for me, closing the deal usually looks like our guys on the visit. The contract's obviously where we need it to be numbers wise. Our attorney, Alex, goes ahead with the review. We get the red line process underway. The school will usually say yes or no to the red lines. Once those are there and we're good to go, the guy signs the contract. Also, there's a letter of intent, financial aid agreement. Those are other things that these guys sign, just like when you're committing out of high school. And once that happens, for me, we're locked in. As long as everything's good with the guys and they're happy and they're satisfied where they are, they're good for me. And I'm not, the only agent that gives that answer, but I'm also, aware that there's agents that would give that answer and do the complete opposite. But at the end of the day, in this business, just like anything else, relationships are huge. Your word is everything. And, if you continue to go back on things, just give it a few years and it'll catch up to you. But yeah. And there's been a few situations like you mentioned that we saw this time, but to the public side of things, you never know what's in the contracts. You never know if the contract had even been signed. I've had guys where they've posted the whole sign thing before and the guy hasn't signed a single paper. So what you're seeing get put out may not always be what the internal thing is. And just like high school recruiting, you see so many guys commit to, let's say, Notre Dame, flip to Missouri, flip to Nebraska. It's just over and they flipping. It's the same exact thing. And two, I will say, if you see people commit during the portal, there is this, it's not a stigma, but it's a standard almost of if you go on a visit in such a crunched portal period like the one we just experienced, the schools want you to commit. Because if you leave uncommitted, they have to bring the next guy in as you should. As we understand, you have to build a roster. So if you're bringing in, let's say 3 receivers, we have a receiver on a visit who's their first guy. If he leaves, they're bringing in the second guy the same night. And so what you'll see also is because the timing is so bad, kids are committing. They're not signing, but they're committing. But they're going to continue fielding this because they don't want to lose what's in their left hand, but so they're going to search for what to put in the right. So it's not an agent's fault. It's not a player's fault. I really think it's the calendar's fault for making it such a rushed decision. Whereas when you looked in the December window, I mean, these guys had 25 days to make a decision. And I mean, as long as your name's entered into the portal, you don't have to commit ever again if you don't want to. There's no deadline for it. So it's a calendar issue at the end of the day, which you'll notice a lot of this will come back to that. But as far as me with finalized, it's usually when the ink dries.
Yeah. And love that explanation because I think a lot of people get worked up over, well, okay, what's coach going to do? What's my team going to do? Oh, that kid was on campus. He didn't commit. Like, do we pass on him? What's going on? And you have the sports media circus that, we certainly try not to be a part of that circus, but it happens, right? You report news, etc. And oftentimes it can be hard to discern on Twitter what's true and what's not. So with all of that, though, I've got to imagine those same emotions, that maybe not anxiety's the right word, but that desire to have things locked up, to get rid of the unknown, to commit to a future. I've got to imagine that is all very present with each of your athletes. So when you've got so many things going on and you've got, voices left, right, and center and fans and media and et cetera, how do you approach trying to keep an athlete's head on straight and guide them through what can be a very hectic now 2-week process?
Using real life examples is big for me. So pulling from, yes, the calendar is different, or yes, this is different, but situationally, it's the same exact thing sometimes. So using real life examples from clients I've had in the past, or other clients we see in the media circuit, like you mentioned, or, I have a lot of agent buddies who have clients going through things. So we communicate on a one-to-one level where it's like, okay, these guys are going through the same thing. So huge on, the using examples, but also the communication is making sure these guys understand, like, we are here. It's okay. It's going to be okay. And also, I think a lot of them get nervous because the portal opens day one. I'd say maybe 20% of the guys, their phones are buzzing. The other 80% are sitting there waiting. And the way I explain it is, once again, it's like a draft. You want to be in the NFL, get used to it. You're not calling your UDFAs the night of the first round. You're just not. You have to wait. Usually, it's top of the board, middle of the board, end of the board. And you know what? If you're an end of the board guy, but you end up in a great situation, that's okay. That's really okay. So I'm really just big on the communication side of things and using the examples and, whatever I can pull to, whether it's a previous client, another agent's client, the NFL. It's just ensuring they understand you're going to be okay. I've never had a client get stuck in the portal, as people say, or lost in the portal. It's making sure. And I think that's a testament to how big the network can be if you have enough GMs and personnel guys at all levels, whether it's FBS or FCS, because that's the side of the portal too people don't understand is the FBS drop down to FCS level. You're a 4-star recruit. Let's say you go to a nice Big Ten school. You redshirt freshman year, sophomore year, you don't even play. It's hard to go somewhere sometimes with no game film and say, oh, I'm a former 4-star. Great. That was 2 years ago. And there's a side of the portal where they drop down FCS. You have a great year. Now you're back up as the starter. And so even ensuring that those relationships are good is huge for me. But once the guys see the work you've done, they really trust you. Just like anything, our first portal wasn't the best, but now it's clockwork for us. And I get excited. It's a lot of work that goes into it. But, to make sure the guys have an understanding, it's just lots of phone calls and FaceTimes, text messages, and making sure that they're, feeling good about their situation.
Yeah. Well, you keep mentioning relationships, and obviously I think that's a testament to the work that you and your team do, which is just top of the line stuff. It's been a pleasure to follow you, especially this last 2 seasons following Brick Athletes. And as I was preparing for this and preparing to talk to you, all of what I know to be true about you guys and your prep and the way that you get guys in the right spots, it made me think of what Curt Cignetti has done at Indiana, right? Where he just won a national championship with the lowest blue chip ratio in modern college football history. And it felt like what he did at Indiana was recruiting and evaluating and developing and building a culture, which all of those things sound like they're in lockstep with how Brick Athletes does their business. What kind of synergy do you find between your approach and that roster building strategy that the Curt Cignettis of the world have?
That's a great comparison. Haven't thought of that. Haven't been told that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Because national champions. I think the biggest thing for us in terms of evaluating guys is just upside, right? What is the upside? Whether it's years left, a guy that can be a developmental piece, someone who has that upside, like you mentioned, or like I mentioned, and just pure freaks. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know the pure freaks, but there's a lot of tools you can use. There's platforms and websites that are used for numerical measures or stats or speed ratings, speed readings, whatever you want to call them. And then, I mean, honestly, it's not that hard to look at a wide receiver who caught 1,200 yards on ESPN either. I mean, let's not overcomplicate the system. If you go, if you see a receiver with 1,200 receiving yards and he's 6'3" as a sophomore at a group of 5 school, I think you and I both know he's going to go make a little money in the SEC the next year. And so it's really, it's not rocket science. It's difficult and it's time consuming because people have to think about the amount of FBS teams plus the amount of FCS teams plus the Division II, Division III, and junior college. People forget about junior college. And so it's time consuming in terms of that. But if you're looking for the right things, it's fairly easy. And we have a decent sized team here. Besides myself, I have 2 guys named Sam and Javon who work under me in the football department. And they're really good. They both played Division I football. Javon played at Duke. Sam played at FIU. And so they have a firm understanding of the game where I wasn't a player. I'm more of the business side of things. And I'm the relationships guy. And they were the former players. So, it's always bouncing off ideas, looking at key plays on PFF or scrolling through some film, watching YouTube clips, whatever it is. And, the biggest thing for me is I don't watch your mixtapes. These guys make mixtapes all the time, and I don't watch them because, I do watch them if they're my client. But at the end of the day, you're going to put 9 plays in the mixtape that make you look like Randy Moss, you know, but what happens when you drop the pass? What's the next play like? You know, do they come right back to you? Are you pulled? Is your head down? Because all of these things that I'm looking at, I know the coaches are looking at times 10. You know, now the mixtape's cool. If you look extremely fast, I'm still going to be interested because there's some things you can fix. But, you know, there's just, when it comes to scouting, it's just simply, if you know what you're looking at, you know what you're looking at. I know that's not the most direct answer, but, you know, it's fairly simple for us.
Yeah.
You know, and along with myself and the 2 people under me, Alex Ministeri is our attorney, and he's a baseball agent. In terms of talent evaluation, he may not be a football guy, but he's great at talent evaluation. So, you know, between that and then just talking to the guys and building a network that's almost like a spider web with my current clients, and, you know, having that relationship where they're like, hey, my teammate so-and-so, he's a dog, he's looking for an agent. Like, I want you guys to connect. Just all of that is how we usually will scout our guys.
I love it, man. Well, Zach, this has been an absolute treat. I feel like I've learned about the space. I know our listeners and our viewers over on YouTube will have as well. I'm sure many of them for the first time, maybe being introduced to Brick Athletes and want to follow you, pay attention to what you guys are doing from here on out. So where can the Jimmies and the Joes head on out to follow you?
On Instagram, our agency is at The Brick Athletes. Pretty simple. Brick Athletes was taken when I first made it, so that's where we're sitting. And my personal is at CRDNEZ. You can see our whole team through the Brick Athletes Instagram, and then Twitter is at ZCARDENEZ. We have an agency Twitter, but I tell you what, I usually run everything through mine. It's just a little simpler. But yeah, man, no, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you, Mitch, and I'm excited to see it when it comes out and see the reception, and hopefully it's good.
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. You know, when we set out to do this, I wanted folks to get to know an NIL agent, see what they were like, you know, behind the Twitter screen, right?
Right.
And I think you've done a tremendous job of advertising yourself. And man, you know, to hear how genuine you are, how concerned you are about not just the dollar amount that your athletes are getting, but how they are setting themselves up for future success with education, with career prospects, etc., I think is extremely, extremely admirable. And so, yeah, man, rooting for you, and can't wait to do this again soon.
Appreciate you, Mitch. I appreciate you having me on, man, and you guys keep killing it.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, to the Jimmies and Joes, thank you for tuning in. As he mentioned, go follow Zach, go follow the Brick Athletes. They're doing amazing stuff. We can't wait to keep creating content here in year 5. Thank you for everybody watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. At 3 Tech Pod is where you can find us if you have stumbled across us for the very first time. For Zach Cardenez, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much. And until next time, so long, everybody.